Hello and welcome to Breaking Bread with Rivaaj Maharaj, where nothing is off the table. For today's episode, I want to talk about the escalations between the United States, Iran, Israel, and the neighboring countries in the Gulf region. So without further ado, let's get into it. The recent war between Iran, the United States, Israel, and Iran's indiscriminate shelling of its neighbors within the region now seems to be spiraling out of control. I did mention in my previous videos that short of a hardline person being put into government, I honestly feel that this region, the Iranian landmass, is going to erupt in some semblance of a civil war. You've got too many different ethnicities. You've got a populace that are now fed up and frustrated, but they are not armed due to the nature of the Ayatollah regime that was and still is in place. It was a brutal regime that held its people in a vice-like grip. You also have reports coming out that Ali Khamenei had put in place directives that should he be taken out, each of these Iranian units are to operate autonomously and independently and make decisions regarding possible targets and attacking those targets. And that is why you see the attack on Oman. Oman was the negotiator between the United States and the Iranians throughout the diplomatic efforts that were going on up until the war erupted. So, for all intents and purposes, you would expect that even though there were American bases in Oman, you would expect that the Iranians would not have targeted the Omanis. However, the Omanis were targeted, and it came as a huge surprise not only to the Omanis, but to most of the world as well. And what you find is that that's where you found statements coming out regarding this doctrine that should the Ayatollah be taken out, then these units all begin to operate independently. And this is why you see this indiscriminate shelling, willy-nilly, and an alienation of any semblance of allies that could have stood with Iran. So even if one of those states would have stood with Iran, the fact that they're all being hit and the civilian population are now being targeted as well, it doesn't bode well for the Iranian regime. Now, coming back to Iran, you have this large landmass made up of all these different ethnicities: the Azeris, the Azerbaijanis, the Kurds, the Baloch, the Persians, the ethnic, those that still practice Zoroastrianism. You've got all of them. This is a melting pot. And you've still got a sizable number of people within Iran that are hardline Shia supporters and supporters of the current regime. I still come to the point that I think the Americans have done a deal with somebody in the Iranian regime. People are talking about this Laranjani chap. I feel that Abbas Arachi may be that person, because he, together with Pezeshkian, have not been attacked. They are still alive, and he has been giving interviews to CNBC and the American channels. And I think this is similar to what happened to Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela, where Delcy Rodriguez, it's now coming out that some 28 or 30 days before the Americans went in, had sold Maduro out. I do think that there is a power vacuum that is being created. Although they're setting up this council and everything, you see a regime that is in collapse. But you also see a very brutal regime that has existed for the last 40, 50 years. And there are a lot of people that are used to this power and are benefiting immensely from this regime being in power. And those figures, they are brutal and they are not about to let it go. Now, a difference in ideology, you see it all the time. ISIS splits up into ISIS KP. You find that Al Qaeda breaks up into these different factions. It happens all the time. You have these situations occurring all over the world. And I don't think Iran is going to be new to that. I think it's just going to follow in the same direction. I don't think that. I know the Israelis are dead set on Reza Pahlavi. Again, I'm going to say I don't think the man has the credentials to carry out what is required in terms of uniting that country and being strong enough to do what needs to be done to maintain some semblance of authority. I know the Americans don't want him there. I think the Arab nations surrounding don't want him there because he had been asking them for funds to be set up and to be funneled into Swiss accounts, and it's just a quagmire. What is going to happen? Are you going to have these pockets of resistance? You're going to have allegiances to different military leaders, similar to what happened in Afghanistan. You had the Taliban, you had the Northern Alliance, you had the Haqqani network, and where similarities exist, you will find a sort of gelling, but there are stark differences to have people move in different directions altogether. Then also you have those who feel, hey, I've got a chance at becoming, somebody who, really powerful in the country. I have some semblance of authority and power. I can muster a militia behind me, and that's all it needs. The way I envisage it is, if you look at Mexico, you had the Guadalajara cartel that was set up, and they had all these plazas, everything was controlled, but the disintegration of that cartel led to splinter groups, and that is what is going to happen in Iran. You're just going to have splinter groups. You're going to have alliances formed, alliances broken, and I think this is what is going to plague the regimes in Iran. So let's say the Americans are able, like they did in Afghanistan, to put in like a Hamid Karzai type figure or whatever it is. They are continuously going to face resistance, like what happened in Iraq. Insurgencies. You're going to have regional players, neighbors that are going to be supporting their own groups within Iran because it needs to serve their purposes. I think it's just opening a can of worms that is just going to spiral way out of control and get a lot worse before it does eventually get better. I think the Americans will be happy to deal with somebody within the IRGC, make it look like there's some sort of reforms taking place, as long as they are able to control and manipulate the oil flow. Because I think the end game here is manipulating the oil flow towards China. I think that line is still going to have a regime that is brutal, that is not going to shed its old ways, and that is still going to be antagonistic towards Israel. I think that they're still going to fund their proxies in the region. So short of them finding some Mandela type figure that can unite the people and get them all to sit down at the table, I think you're going to find these pockets of resistance, you're going to find this insurgency, and Iran is tinkering on the brink of civil war. Don't forget, Donald Trump has now not ruled out the possibility of ground troops, United States ground troops. The US have already taken 6 casualties that we know of. The Israelis are taking casualties. They've now got troops on the ground in Lebanon. The Lebanese army are retreating so that the Israelis can take on Hezbollah. I think if the Israelis are committed in Lebanon and they're still mounting this campaign against Iran, then it's going to be left to the United States to help deploy troops in Iran, which then bogs the United States down in a quagmire, and it doesn't look good at all for Donald Trump. He's already saying, while he thought it was a 4-week campaign, but it could go longer. So I think the reality of the situation is beginning to dawn. Time is going to be our only opportunity or our only window into what is going to happen. We can all speculate, and we've all got theories on how this is going to play out. The Americans still say that they have a lot more and a lot worse to offer the Iranians by way of attacks. Whether this is all bluster or whether this is in fact the truth remains to be seen. We know they've taken out Ahmadinejad. We know they've taken out some top Iranian generals. And while you might not have, figures around who the myth and propaganda has been built, you will still get these. It's basically law of the jungle. So the most vicious are going to come to power, or going to grab the reins of power. And if you have 2 or 3 of those guys in there, then then you have a civil war. It's going to be like Libya. It's going to be like what happened in Afghanistan. So we're going to keep a close eye on this and update you accordingly. I want to thank you for spending time with us. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, as it helps us with the algorithm and it helps our channel to grow.